director at Garnish London. As part of my teaching at the school, I teach logic and mixing. And today we're basically going to be going to some of the stuff that we teach on our courses about how to make good drums in Logic Pro. So we can look at what we're going to look at today is how to use things like Drummer. We're going to look at beat machines. We're going to look at step sequencers. We're going to look at working with samples, and we're going to look at just some of the workflow around that and how to make, hopefully, give you a bit of inspiration to make your drums a bit better. So let's start with some of the basics. So the first and simplest way, if you've not used Logic before or you're new to it, is to use what's called Drummer. Now, Drummer sounds like a bit of a get out of jail card, a bit of a cop out, but actually it's a pretty good tool if you use it in a creative way. So the simplest way of using drums in Logic is probably to use what's called loops. So Apple comes with all these loops, and you've got thousands and thousands of different loops that come pre-made. Everything from piano to effects to you name it, it's all in that folder. Now you'll see in here that you've got blue files, which are audio. You've got green, which look like this, which are MIDI. And then you've also got yellow. So you can go up here to this little foursquare there, and this will allow you to basically sort by what you want. Now in this instance, we want what are called drummer loops. So if I go down to drummer loops, I've got all of these different kits, and they're basically named after the drummers, which I'll show you in a second, from the Logic software. So let's just take something like Graham, right? Graham verse. We're going to pull this out and pop this onto our channel. Now you'll notice that because Logic works like this, if it's the first sample that you pull out of the loops, my BPM in the project will change to whatever the loop is. Other loops that you pull out, like if I, for example, pull this one out, will snap to whatever your BPM is set to. So that was in 80 BPM down there, but now in the project it's gone to 100 because my last sample was at 100. So if I listen to this first one that we've done, pretty standard beat. So this is quite like a rock beat. Obviously, like it's an acoustic drum kit, it's bringing all that kind of like live flavour, which is cool. But you can see at the bottom here, which is the most important bit, I've got this window that's come up, which allows me to edit my my drummer roll. So if I press E to bring up that edit window, if it was a MIDI file, you'd get the MIDI roll there, so you could edit the notes that you're playing. If it was an audio file, you get the waveform. With a yellow drummer track like this, you're going to get this drummer window. So what this is showing you is it's basically showing you this XY axis here, which is allowing you to change what the beat is, and it's showing you the kit, which is like what's making up the actual beat that the algorithm's making. So let's start on the left side. So if I pull this down to the bottom left, you can see straight away this waveform here has changed into a much more timid looking kind of beat, right? So if I press now, really simple stuff, really soft. That's what we've asked for. Simple, soft. Now we've got it. So the next thing we can do is maybe go to the center, and if you watch the waveform again, like that's now become a lot more populated, a bit more lively if we listen to that. It's pretty much what we asked for, middle of the road. And if we go to the top right, we've then got loud and complex. Again, pretty much what we asked it to do. So this little XY axis is a good way of just kind of figuring out like what kind of thing you want roughly. Then on the right hand side, we'll just go for the middle. On the right hand side, you've then got your drums, right? So you can choose what patterns you want it to play, but you can also choose what instrument you want it to use within the kit. So if I only wanted, for example, toms, I can press the toms instead of the hats, and you can see here it's changed that over the toms. So if I press this again, it's just playing a tom beat. If I don't want the kick, I can turn this off. If I don't want the snare, I can turn that off. But I do want claps. So I'm able to customize this kind of groove that it's built for me based on what I've asked it to do in the XY on the left. Now on the right, I've also got the option to, if I just select a regular kind of beat, so snare, hat, kick, that kind of thing, I can also change the patterns that they're playing here. So if I go to the left hand side and just choose one of these, if you listen to the kick and snare, now I'll go to 2, different groove, 3. So it's given me a different pattern for each one. Same with the hats. If I change this, 1. So they're all kind of variations on like the similar idea. So if the left sets the energy, this is setting the kind of like actual rhythm and the pattern within that energy that you've asked it to do. So once you've selected that, a nice little tip here is if you're using something like a sample or you're playing something, say you play bass, right, and you're playing bass in, I'll just use a sample here for the minute, then, let's turn this back on. So we'll go to audio loops, I'll just bring up some bass. Where are we? Cool. So here's some bass here, right? So I'll just choose, I don't know, let's have a listen to this. That's fine. So I'm bringing this audio loop in, as you saw with the session with Amir, it's going to pretty much snap that to the tempo, so no problems there. But what I can do is now I've got this bass file, if I listen to this, if I press follow on my drums, it will give me the option to follow the bass, because that's one of the other channels that's around it. So if you've got an audio channel or a MIDI channel in there, you can ask the drummer to follow that rhythm, and the algorithm will do its best to basically play something which follows that. So let's have a listen to what it comes up with. Okay, so it's doing a pretty good job. You can feel that kind of bump bumped bum bum bumped bump. So you're getting a good level of follow there. So if you're not confident building drums, and you're trying to start with a pattern, and you're not, if you're not a drummer or you've not really worked with rhythm before, drum is a really good way of getting off the floor quite quickly and putting together an energy and a pattern and a few different instruments in your drum kit that you want to give you a kind of sense of a vibe that you're going after. So that's a really good one there. The only other thing that I would say with this is that there are more advanced settings in this, but just for the minute, the other one is fills. So if you don't want fills, just bring this all the way down, and you'll see that the end of the bar here and the end of the bar here become pretty flat. So I play from here. It's pretty boring. If I up this, it will introduce more creative stuff in there. So I've got that little snare roll now, I've got that cymbal that's come in, that's kind of giving it a bit of life. So fills is a good way of doing that. Okay, so that's the kind of idea of drummer, is to give you a kind of off-the-shelf beat that you can work with in a musical way rather than having to program it. You've also on the left here got different types of presets that you can use, and these will just give you different ideas of beats. So if you're not sure what to do, maybe just try some of these. So if I press non-linear, for example, that's one interpretation. If I go for another one, similar but different. So within this kit, you've got different beats there. Now, let's say that I'm not into, I guess it's rock, funk, fusion, whatever we're making, with these two loops. Let's say I want to go change genre and make something that's more pop or more EDM or whatever it's trying to do. When I'm in drummer, I can press Y to bring up library, and library is the same for any MIDI instrument or audio instrument, depending on what you're doing. So if you press Y, you'll get this left pane here, which is the library. And then what we can do here is we can choose our drummer as well as our sounds. So say I like the pattern, but I don't like the drum kit, then I can go in here at a high level and just choose what drum kit I want to listen to it on. So let's just listen to it on the Brooklyn kit, for example. That's one interpretation. If we go to Bluebird, same pattern, but you're just getting a very different feel because the kit's different, the cymbals are different. You're just getting all all that different stuff. Equally, I might want to take it, and we'll go into this more later on in this hour, into an electronic space and be like, okay, well, let's look at a drum machine. How I've got a pattern here that I like, that I've built on an acoustic kit with Graham, and I want to bring that into a classic kind of sound like an 808 or a 909. So we'll do more of this in a minute, but if I wanted to select one of those, then I can go here. It's getting quite muzak at this point, but still, you get the idea, right? You can switch the sounds over. So we'll go back to this for the minute, because that's where we were. Now, say I didn't like the pattern or anything about it at all, and I wanted to change the genre, I can do that above here in drummer. So I'm using Graham, who apparently is an experimental songwriter, according to this. But I could, if I wanted to stay in the songwriter vein, I could be like, okay, well, what does Austin sound like? Now you'll get a thing here basically saying if you do this, you will lose the settings that you're on. Like, so for example, this stuff you set up here will be lost. So just be careful with that. But in this case, I know that I want to do that. So yeah, Blue Ridge, Austin. Let's have a listen to this. So you can feel even within the same wheelhouse, i.e. songwriter, that's a very different sound. The kit's different, the idea is different. It feels a lot it gives a different vibe. So if you're kind of stuck within your if you're stuck within that kit, try different drums in the same genres, and they will respond differently. So if I bring the energy down, you'll still get a very different look. So this one's very brush based, like rooted brush, getting a much more kind of held back sound than we were with Graham. So that's good. But let's just say that we want to go into another space. So we want to take this out of the acoustic world, and we want to go into like R&B or electronic. Let's say R&B for the minute. So we'll go with a modern R&B drummer, and this is going to give us this kind of sound. So in fairness, that wasn't as far away as I thought it would be, because it's still an acoustic kit, but you can feel that the style has changed, like the way that they're swinging it, the backbeat, all of that stuff that makes up like a drum beat has changed. So that's just an example of another drum using the same acoustic kits. If I go into electronic, let's take it into a more kind of like house place. Julian, my namesake. So let's have a listen to what he's saying. So this is presumably going to be quite different. Now at this point, this gets very confusing because you've got like a funk bass line with a kind of slowed down house beat. So we'll lose this just for the sake of looking at these drums. But what you can feel, and I'm going to bump the BPM up to a more suitable 140 for house. I'll take it 130. That's a little bit, it's a bit early for that. Cool, so we're 130, we've got these drums now. So you can feel this is a whole different wheelhouse. It's very electronic, 4 to the floor, everything's quite big, but the controls are the same. So if I double click on this, I've still got the same layout here. I've got the energy that I can choose. Is it complex? Is it loud? Is it simple? Is it soft? Or is it a combination of those? I've got the presets on the left-hand side, which I can use if I want to, so that's good. And then on the right-hand side, I've got, although it's different because it's laid out in a kind of drum machine-esque way, I've got these 7 elements that I can draw together. So if I only want the kick and the claps, I can take these off. Can't hear a clap in there, but and I can still ask it to follow another audio. So if I go into the loops up here, for example, and I pull out, let's say like a house bass line, for example. So we go to genre, go to house, and then we can go to instrument, we can go to bass. So now I've really narrowed it to, just house bass lines, and we'll listen to some of these. I feel like I'm in Triple X, the film. All right. So let's say we're going with this Triple X thing. Let's have a listen to this. So besides being quite over the top, like you can see down here that I can still follow whatever I want with my kick pattern. So if I go down to the bottom, you can see twister bass is there. So if I then ask that to follow, the pattern changes again in the electronic space and it follows that. So in a basic sense, like if you're struggling for ideas with drums, like drummer's your first port of call, drummer and loops. So to recap this quickly on drummer, because I'm not going to spend too much time on this. On the right here, you can obviously choose drummer loops. If you're looking for stuff, you can just go through these and audition like some of the different things that they've got in there. What's this sound like? And you can try and figure out like loops that you want to bring in from there. If you're more confident in terms of what you know what you want, you can obviously go into the editor window on here, and you can basically like design something a bit more bespoke. Now let's say that I have made a beat with one of these, and I'm just going to go to we'll go to like let's go electro trap, and we'll just kind of like do a middle of the road sounding beat here. Cool. So let's say that I've got this, right? Now, the next question is, okay, I've edited my rhythms, I've edited presumably the arrangement around it. How do I then edit the actual drum sounds themselves? And if I want to edit this beat, so like I can put my own fills in, I can put my own patterns in, like how do I then move from this position to there? So there's a few different ways of doing this. The first one is which is quite simple, is if you want to edit the beat itself, you can go into this bit here, right click, and do convert to MIDI region. Now there is a shortcut for this, which is Control Option, I believe it's Control Option Command M, but it's a bit of a horrible shortcut, so normally I just end up doing convert to MIDI region in here. But if I do that, then what you'll see is this will switch over to MIDI. So in here, I then, as I said before, like my editor pane, if I toggle with E, no longer shows the drummer aspect of Logic. What is showing me is the MIDI editing aspect. So if I want to change like position of a drum hit, like say I want to move stuff around like we do elsewhere, I can move all that. If I want to change the velocity of a hit, I can do that. If I want to introduce swing, if I want to quantize things differently. So it opens up a lot of possibilities. And the way that I've seen people use this, and the way I use this sometimes myself, is if you are like looking for ideas and you just want to kind of get an initial thing down, find something in drummer that you just kind of vibe with on some level, and then convert it to MIDI, and then use that as a backbone for what you're about to create or where you want to move to next. So that convert to MIDI feature is nice. Unfortunately, I've had people ask me before, can you convert the other way? Can you go from MIDI to drummer? You can't. I mean, that kind of makes sense because obviously, the possibilities of MIDI are endless, whereas with drummer, it's basically translating something out of a piece of software into MIDI. So yeah, you can't do it the other way around, but you shouldn't need to, which is good. So yeah, let's look at editing the drum sounds themselves, right? So first of all, we're going to do a bit of a simple edit, so I'm going to go back one step, just doing Command Z to undo. So I'm in drummer again. And let's say that I had selected the original guy we were on, Graham, right? And I wanted to change the drum sounds that I'm using. Now, the reason I'm bringing this one up first is because it's easier in Logic. It's a simpler process to change your acoustic drum sounds than it is to change your electric drum sounds. So what you can do here is when you've got a drummer track in front of you, you can basically press I, and it will bring up the inspector menu on the left. And in your channel strip, you'll see that you've got drum kit here in the instrument slot. So if I take this out of the instrument slot, you'll see it says instrument. And if I bring up the mix window, you can see it says instrument, where are we? Input is what it is the line it'll be under. So MIDI and drummer instruments or any VST will have a software in there, whether it's sampler, contact, drum kit, whatever it is. So I can go in here and it brings up this window, which is a basic drum kit. And what we can do is we can click on the individual parts of the drum kit and it will give me different options of how I want to edit this. So the first thing I can do is just change the drum. So like if I've got a kick drum like this, if I just listen to the beat, and I change drum, that one's much tighter, much more damp, That's somewhere in the middle. So I can instantly just change my sounds. If I wanted to change the snare, I can go in, change it to this. I've instantly kind of created something that I like more than what I had before. Then if I want to kind of go a level down on the right hand side, I can dampen it if I want. And if you haven't worked with acoustic drums before, obviously like drums reverberate. So if you hit a drum, it's the skin, it goes ooh, and that's what makes the sound. But the initial impact is normally what you want. Obviously, if you've got a looser tune, if you've got a less dampened drum, it will give you more of the boo kind of reverbs, kind of the reverberation of the drum. So if you dampen it more, you'll get a tighter sound. So if you listen to this, as opposed to this, so the snare's quite open and flappy. If I bring that in, it sounds like someone's put a t-shirt on top of the drum, which is what sometimes people do. So yeah, you can basically influence that. You can influence the tuning as well. So having a drum kit that's tuned in a complementary way to itself, but also to your track, is a really good way of just getting strong feeling drums. And you can also level your drums as well. So if your snare's too loud, for example, this guy felt very loud, you might want to just drag that back a bit, and that feels good as well. So this is a nice little like easy way of editing acoustic drums in Logic. Another thing you might want to consider with this is using what's called smart controls. So you can press B and it will give you this little window, which looks a bit dated but actually is quite useful, and it will just allow you to balance your sounds. So nothing much to say there, but if you're doing an acoustic drum kit, that's how I would do it. If we're looking at electric, which is what we're kind of predominantly going on, so we're on Ronnie. Now for some reason this is jacked. My faders are all the way up. If you're out there and wondering whether you should push your faders up, don't, because you will clip, which is bad. So basically what we're going to do here is we've got a drum kit which has been laid out for us. It sounds like what we're expecting, electro trap, but I want to change the sounds in this one. What can I do? So I can still use B like I was doing before, but it brings up a slightly different set of smart controls. So this will basically affect most of the drum. Well, it will affect all of the drum kit output. So for example, if I want to use a filter, i.e. an EQ filter, so a high cut filter will take the high frequencies of your sound down, so you'll get a darker tone. So if I do this, I've kind of moved it next door now, or like into someone's car, and I can kind of bring it back. It's a nice way of kind of creating like a bit of like a ambient or like kind of holding state if you're trying to build like a track. And the other way I can go into a low cut thing, and I can bring this up. So again, if you're trying to do if you're trying to rise up into like a section and you want to like thin your drums out so you can drop them back in, something like that's good. And if you are familiar with automation, then you can obviously automate all these. So if you want to bring your filters in and out while you're doing drums, you can automate these filters. That will obviously bring a lot of excitement and stop your drums feeling flat over the track, which is kind of the goal. You can also then do some basic EQ, so high end, low end. So if you want more low end, there's our kick. If I turn that down, it's a very kind of poppy sounding kick. Same with highs. Pretty simple controls here. Drive will add a bit of distortion, crush will add a bit of compression. Oh no, sorry, crush is a bit crusher, my fault. So you're getting that kind of like bit crushed like distortion. Drive is just like a regular distortion. So these are quite high level controls for your sound, and like you've got some effects on the right hand side. But if you want to affect things at a simple level, this would be a good place to start. If you want to get a bit more into it, which is what the point of today's session is, let's look at how you can work with Drum Machine Designer. So you remember what I said before about the acoustic drum kit? I had an acoustic drum kit called Drum Kit, and it was in the instrument slot of my channel in Logic. So now that drum kit slot has got what's called DMD in it, which is Drum Machine Designer. So if I open Drum Machine Designer, I am presented with this. And what this basically, if you've seen, if you're kind of new to this and you're just trying to visualize something, if you kind of imagine like on YouTube or Instagram or whatever, you've probably seen people with pad MIDI controllers. Have we got pad MIDI controller? Nope, don't have one here to hand, but you will have seen them. They're like grey kind of pads that you can play drums on. What this up here is basically a load of those pads. So like, I've got my kick on one, my snare on another. I've got clicks, claps, everything kind of assigned to one pad. But really, what's happening here is they're assigned to MIDI notes on the keyboard. So C1 is your kick, D1 is your snare, C sharp, etc. Like it's assigned to all the keys on your MIDI keyboard. So if I play my C1 on my keyboard, which is beneath the camera, which you can't see, then I'm getting my kick there come through. Now, if you're doing drums in MIDI, the kind of assignments are pretty standard. So like C is always your kick normally, or at least your lowest C in the register of the instrument is normally your kick. D is normally your snare. Your hats are normally on like F sharp, G sharp, that kind of place. And then your toms are normally on like F, G, A. So there's some pretty claps are D sharp. Like there's some pretty set. Most drum softwares will use the same assignments. Some of them will work in different octaves. So I know, for example, BFD, the drum emulator, like C0 is the kick, which you can obviously change, but like default, C0 is the kick. I know for a fact in all Logic ones, C1 is always your kick. So if you're looking for it on the keyboard, C1 is where you start. And then as you go up, you get everything else in order. So with this, what we've got, we've got the same controls as in the smart controls. So if I pull this up, see this down here, is the same as this. So the smart controls are what are called kit controls, which are up here on the top right, and they affect the whole kit. So if you were to think of this as a drum machine, that would be like your main output or amp controls. What we are going to look at though is how you can influence like the individual sounds. So if I click on kick, then what it does is it gives me like a set of controls just for that kick. So if I within this little thing here, I can do solo and mute. So if I want to solo it, you can see over here it solos my channel, but also solos that kick. So now I'm just listening to my kick, and I can then use these controls to edit what my kick should sound like. So I can go put some distortion in there if I want, bring out some of that kind of mid-range growl, which is quite nice. If I want more sub, I can double down on that. If I want more kind of like high end, some more mids, I can get some of the knock in there. Gives you that kind of like punch feeling. So yeah, you can kind of shape your kick sound in a basic way here. You can also increase the length of the kick as well. So if you want a shorter kind of poppy sounding kick, that's a much tighter kick sound. You get a bit more of a tail there, like a kind of 808 sound there. But you can probably hear, like as I open this up, there's also like a tone there, like a that's your tone of your kick. So I can change my pitch of my kick as well. It's a pretty jolly sounding kick now. So if you haven't thought about changing your pitch of your drums, like this would be a good one for you to investigate. So if your track is in A minor, right, and your root note of your like bass part or your chord progression or whatever is in A, and you can match your kick to an A or a complementary harmony, then that's going to make your track much tighter, because what will happen is it will start moving in complementary frequencies. Whereas if you've got your kick like a semitone out from your bass, then there's going to be, although it may not like ruin your track, which is pretty fair to say, it will affect like the overall, it will create dissonance in your track. So if you haven't played around with this, try and find a complementary pitch for your, not just your kick but your other sounds as well, to whatever part it is that you're using. I'll do some in a second. You can we can look at that. So yeah, so you've got these controls, and on the right you've also got some controls for reverb and things like that. Now, if you're interested, you can see, I'm going to show you this in a second, but you can see as I turn this, what's really happening is it's actually affecting your mix window. So I've got a send here going to some reverb. As I push this up and down, my send goes up and down. So it's just kind of giving you an easy way of like dialing some reverb up and down. But we'll come to that later. Same with delay. Volume and pan are pretty straightforward. So in a simple way, what I could do is I could change my kick tone, but I could also just change the whole kick sound if I didn't like it. And the way I would do that is by using my library window again. So if I press Y to bring back this guy, I'm just going to turn off my loops window with O, which gives me a bit more space. I'm going to turn off the bottom window, the smart controls window with B, and my inspector window with I, which hasn't worked for some reason. Why is that? There we go. I would say, particularly if you're working on laptops, learn your window shortcuts, because if I want to bring all that back, I can just do that, which takes me no time, but I've bought back a lot of screen. And when you're working on laptops, that, I'm working on a massive screen right now, luckily, but if you're working on a laptop, that is, it's a space is a premium, whatever the phrase is. Okay, cool. So here's my kick. I want to change it out of something else. So I'm going to go to like tension or something. Let's have a listen to what this sounds like. So put it back in the beat. Oh, sorry, just take that off. So that kick's like a really kind of like gnarly, boxy kick. Bit of like a woollier low kick, that one. That sounds kind of similar to the original one we had. But you can see how it's changing the kick sample that's going in here, right? And what's happening behind this is it's loading different audio files into what's called Q sampler. So as you may know, recently in Logic, 10.5 and 10.6 introduced a new sampler, a new drum machine way of working, which was improved. So this was in the previous versions, but it's better now. And it also introduced a step sequencer. So thankfully, Ultrabeat, which if you've used it before, it's not a fun experience, is pretty much made obsolete, which is great. And if I click here, what you can see is you can actually see the kick sample here. So if I want to go in and edit, like, the rate at which this comes in or whatever, I can do that in the sampler. We're not going to do that today. And I can also, like, do some like some synthetic sample modulation or envelopes or filters or whatever I want to do to affect that sound. So for example, if I want to soften it up and like kind of open up the attack on the amp on the envelope for the amp a little bit, I can do that. I get a softer sound already. See? So it's a really good piece of kit. This, I mean, if you're new to Logic, don't worry about this. This is a bit more advanced, and you will no doubt learn about this in due course. But if you do understand what I'm talking about, then make use of this, because it's a really nice way of tying together Q sampler and drum machine designer, and kind of giving you the ability to work with essentially whatever this is, 16 samplers on one board, which is nice. Cool. So as you can see, you've got an audio file here. Now this kind of begs another question, because in 10.5, the good thing is they're giving you loads of samples. So I think there's like 40 to 50 just kick samples, and then every every instrument you've got here, hats, cymbals, blah blah blah. There's loads of them. So you can change, you can change the sound of your drums like really easily. But what you can also do, which is cool, is you can bring in samples from elsewhere. So if I want to bring in something from my machine. I just had this brought up earlier, so I didn't have to look for it, which is good. And I'm just going to have a listen to one of these sounds. So if I go and play one of these, okay, it's kind of like a woolly, like lo-fi kind of kick sound. Oh, let me just go back to that. So I'll just take one of these. What I can do is I can click this here and just drag it straight into the sampler and drop it on top. He says, let me just try that again. That should just let me. You should see a little green plus sign come up. Okay, well that's a bit of a technical difficulty there. I'll just do clear pad and see if I can get it to work this way. So clear pad will basically remove anything from your pad. And then what I can do is try that one more time, just see if that works. Well, if you've got, I'm not sure why it's not working today, but with almost any sample, you can drop that in to the sampler as well. So if you've got one shots from a sample pack, or if you've got, like, you can use this for melodic samples as well. You can drop them all into one pad. It's really good if you're playing live. Obviously, if you want to bring different sounds in, you can do it that way, but it works the same. So unfortunately, that's not worked today, but it will work on your machine, so try that out. So we're going to stick with this cinematic funk thing. Just to, actually, we'll choose a nice one. That's fine. Bit more fitting. Okay, cool. So let's have a look at a few other ways to edit this sound now that we've got it in here. So if I close this window and go back to my main window, which is the grid, close library, I can also, if I want to, drop down on the stack here. So this is what's called a stack in Logic. And what that is basically a group of channels grouped under one aux. So the output of all these channels goes through this channel here. So if I bring up I, you can see that the drum machine is on this channel here. But if I go to kick, then basically what that does is allows me to then put effects or EQ or whatever it is on the individual channels. Or if I want to change the level or the panning or whatever, I can also do that from here. So to my point before, Drum Machine Designer does control this in a way. So for example, if I take my kick and I go to pad controls and I start changing the volume, can you see how the fader on the left there is going up and down? So that's basically what it's doing. But if you're more accustomed to working with mixers or the mix window, then you might find it easier to work like this. And obviously when you've got a beat going like that, and you might want to, for example, put like, you might want to compress or EQ or whatever it is, your snare, different to your kick, different to your hats, then you can obviously break it down by channel and work in these stacks. So all the drum machines from Logic come in that format, which allows you to kind of really go into that like channel by channel view, and and gives you loads of control over your drum sound, which is good. So yes, at the moment we're still using this. So let's say that we've put together a kit that we like, right? So we've got drum machine. I'm going to just change out a few bits in here. So let's have a look. We're going to change some hats. Going to go in here. Hi-hats. Let's have a listen to some of these. I like that. That's tighter for me. So we'll go open hats. Don't like that. That's nice. That hangs together nice. I'm going to try and change over my snare now. So I feel like I'm going to go for like a rim kind of sound here. So that's sounding nicer to me already. That kind of sound has moved very, very quickly from where it was to something that's just a bit more customized. And you'll notice as well that obviously with drum machines, they used to be, well, they still are, but like, predominantly they used to be like physical bits of gear with sounds preloaded, and so like the most famous ones with the best sounds basically informed like a load of genres. And the reason that everyone talks about 808s is because the Roland 808 was one of the big drum machines of the day and has informed like countless records and genres and all kinds of stuff going forward. So you'll hear a lot about 808, 909, and in Logic you've got 808 and 909 emulations. So if you're interested in this, if you open a new software instrument, go to a default patch, create, and on the left hand side go to electronic drum kit. If you go down, you've got the full ones here, so 808, 909, and that will just give you a pretty damn close emulation of an 808 or a 909. So anyway, I digress. But the point is that we've now made this sound a little bit closer to what I want. But I don't really like what I have, my rhythm, right? I don't really like that. I've kind of like gone off what I had from Graham originally back 45 minutes ago, whatever it was that we started using this. So I'm going to try and make my own drums now. So this is where you're moving a little bit into the territory of like, you've got to be a bit more confident to do this. If you've not done drums before, I'm going to show you how to do step sequencer in a second, so that will make things a little bit easier. But if you are reasonably confident with rhythm, like most of the time you probably can piece together like a pretty good melody on your own. Pretty good beat on your own. So obviously I can play on my keyboard down here. So the first way that we could do this if I wanted to would be just to record MIDI in. Now you'll see here that drummer tracks don't support recording, and if I try and press record it will bring this up. Now the reason for that is because the drummer track is expecting me to input a drummer region, and the drummer region is triggered by this plus sign, and if I do that, I go to the right, it will give me another one here. And then each of these individual regions will be programmed differently. So if I want this one to be loud and complex, and this one to be simple and soft, you can see the two are different, and the controls here influence only the region that I've got selected. So that's why drummer regions don't let you do that. But if I press record, it will prompt me to create a new track, and it will then create a new track with my drum machine that I've already set up. So no harm done. I can still keep this one in the background if I want to do that. So one way here of doing this would be to just to roll record, and we could just keep our metronome on with K. So if I turn K off, it goes away. Press K, comes back. And what I might want to do here is just set up like a 4-bar loop, and I can just play something in if I'm that way inclined. So I might start with my kick. And I might want to quantize that as I'm doing it. Then I might put like some. Now you can notice here that if you've not edited MIDI before, I'm quantizing with Q as I go. And what this does is it basically takes this quantized value and brings my drums into that quantization. But you can see that this thing here that I did, which I don't really like, but I've done, is not really working in 16th notes. So I can select this individual line by pressing the MIDI key that controls them. And then I can go in and just change that to an 8th note. So you can see that that's now brought that into what I was trying to do, right? Which is nice. Another thing that I could do if I was trying to build drums in Logic would be to use note repeat. So if I want some hats that are like, then I could just go on my keyboard, which means that I'm pretty limited by my ability to play hats really quick. But if I want to do something a bit more adventurous, I can go up here, go to note repeat. So this is my little additional toolbar at the top. Go to note repeat, 16th notes. If I hold note down now, I'm just going to get that rolling. So if I press record now, just writing that in. I can take my clip off now. So that's one way that you could start to build drum sounds, right? Is you could just start to basically play it in on MIDI and come up with stuff as you go along. And you can use note repeat as well, like if you want to put like some rolls in as well. I could play this again. Put a little roll in there. Just like gives it a bit more interest. So you can use one note repeat on top of the other to give like 2 different levels of rhythm, which is a nice little tip there if you're trying to build something with a bit more excitement. But yeah, this is more like MIDI recording that I'm going down now, but it's just to show you that you can use your drum machine that way. Another way of doing it would be to use what's called step sequencer. So with this is what's called a MIDI region. If it's green, it's a MIDI region. If it's blue, it's an audio region. If it's yellow, it's a drummer region. Now, what we can do as well is we can create, with a right click here, a pattern region. And what the pattern region does is it gives us the ability to use this down here, which is a step sequencer. Now you can see, and particularly if I was on a laptop, I'm already run out of space. So let's reset up my window, turn my library off, turn my inspector off. Now I've got a nice big step sequencer that I can see here. So I can see I've got my kicks, I've got my my rims, and I've chosen these sounds earlier, you remember. So if I press that, that's what I had. Same kick I had there. And if you haven't used the step sequencer before, what it does is it basically has a certain number of steps. In this case, on the top right here, you can see 16. And if I press play, you can see the cursor, just the playhead running along the step sequencer, and it's basically going to play anything that's on those notes. Now at the moment nothing's selected, so nothing's going to play. If I put a kick there, then it's going to play that every time it comes back round. Now this is exactly how a real like drum machine sequencer works. Like most of the time they're 16 step, so you would have 16 buttons at the bottom. You'd select your kick, then you'd be like, okay, I want the kick here, here, here. And so for example in this instance I might want the kick there, there, and there. It's just going to roll around each time. So then what I can do, and this is a good way if you're not comfortable with things like, if you're not comfortable playing, or you're not comfortable quantizing in like an advanced rhythm or whatever you need, like it's a good way of just trying to like visualizing a beat as a grid and trying to understand, okay, well, where like is my backbeat falling? In this case, I might want to put my backbeat on the 3. So you can see this is the first measure of the bar, second measure because there's this kind of break here, third measure, fourth measure. So if I now press play, so that sounds very stock to me, right? So I'm going to move my kick over, and I'm going to move this kick over here, give it a bit of swing. If it feels a bit better to me, okay? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in some hats. So I can, rather than using note repeat, what I could do in this if I wanted to create a similar pattern, I can just click and drag, take those out, the whole way along, and it will just roll for me. So it's a very, very simple way of like visualizing the beat. If I want to take a note out, just click it again, and I can create some breaks in here. So if I want to go in like threes, for example, I can't see over that end. So I can do that. So you can see, because you've got all your different elements of your drum machine here, you can build really complex rhythms really quickly, and you can. It's a really good way of using the sounds that you've already picked out and trying to like just like work with the rhythm in like itself rather than the sounds, and not have to worry about playing it live or whatever. You can just like try, look out. If it doesn't work, try something else out. And that's kind of where these controls on the left come in, because what you can do here is each individual line has its own sequencing parameters. So for example, with this kick, if I want the kick to work in 4s or 8s and the snare to work in 16s, what you'll start to see is this line move slower. If I press play, why has that gone? Oh, there we go. So you can see this kick line's moving nice and slow now, half the speed of the other one. So I've got a whole different beat now of that. If I go to 16, back to my original beat now. If I went to 32, it'd be really quick. Kind of bounce thing going on there. So I like that 8, that's working for me. Similarly with the hats, I might take this up to 32. Same thing, I don't like that, but that's another way of doing it. On the right hand side, you've also got, so you can solo and mute these like you would any other track, but you can also play forward and backwards here. So if I want the hat pattern to go the other way, I can then play it so that it goes right to left. So if I press play here, so that's completely changed the swing of this. And what I could do if I was really trying to mix it up is use this one, which goes front then back. So now it's come back, now it's going to go along, now it's come back the other way, which basically creates two halves to my beat, right? So I get like an A and a B section part of the beat. So there's lots in this sequencer that you can use just at a very face value level. Like if you get a sound in there that you like if I just put a couple of clicks and things in here. Kind of cool with that. Just get a beat going across it. Now I might want to call in a sound that I haven't got here, right? But I know is on the kit. So if I play that sound, like where's that? That's not coming out of anything that I've got on this. That's not a hat or a clap or whatever. So I can go up here to this little plus sign, kit pieces, and I can go to, that's presumably tom high. I'm going to guess it's tom high. So I will then add that in, and you can see I've got tom high now. So if I want to put that in somewhere, so I'm not really mad on that, but the point is that like you've got the ability to bring in other sounds in the kit. So anything that's not shown there, if you can't see it, it's probably in this list here. Cool. And then the other controls that we've got on this that we haven't gone through. The first one is the step sequencer at the top. So you've got 16 steps. You can take that up to like 64 steps if you want. And what you'll see is you get a much longer progression of the drum machine here. So you could, for example, have like 4 or 5 different parts of your drum beat, and each time it comes around it will change. Or you can take it right down and have it in 12 steps if you want to keep it really simple. The other thing is that within these individual tracks, you've got drop downs. So if you drop one of these down, you can see that you can control the velocity, which is really simple because you can just click it in different parts or drag it, and it will control how hard they're hit. So if you're trying to give like a bit of a human feel to a beat, you might want to kind of like, and you can click and drag it, just create a bit of a random velocity going on. Just gives it a bit more of a kind of sense of things not being as robotic. But you've also got note repeat again, and this one's probably a bit more intuitive than the one at the top with MIDI. So if I want to drag this up and put like a double hat there, you can hear that. Just adding that one there gives it a double roll. So I can be much more subtle with my note repeats in step sequencer than I can by using note repeat in MIDI. Admittedly, it is kind of like, you know, if you want to perform it in and you kind of like you really know like what you want, like doing it in MIDI is still quite fun. But like step sequencer is a really good way of like adding stuff in, and you can, I mean, the note repeat goes up to like 16, which is pretty nuts at this speed. But at a lower speed, you could, you know, that might make sense. So yeah, so that's a good way of using step sequencer. You can see here we've gone through like a progression of using of going from drummer, which is basically giving us ideas of beats and kind of like kits and stuff like that. We're then going to changing the drummer, changing the rhythms, but also changing the kits and the players. Then we're looking at, we've looked at how to customize the drum sound. So what if I want to change the kick? What if I want to change the hats? What if I want to change the snare? That kind of stuff. And then we looked at the MIDI recording, and now we're looking at sequencer. So there's kind of like different levels of how you can use like drum sounds in Logic, right down from like I don't know how to write anything and I just want a beat, right up to like I specifically know what I want this to sound like. I know what sample I want to use, and I know exactly what rhythm I want to do it, and effects. So there's a real gamut there from beginner all the way up to advanced to allow you to do that. And if you're not sure in step sequencer and you just kind of want to get some ideas, they've also thrown in this thing called patterns as well. So you can see here there's like a little square thing with like some yeah, just like little two panes. And what this does is it brings up a little thing on the left here. Now, I don't think this machine obviously has these patterns loaded for whatever reason, but if you're on your own Logic and you want to try this out, click on there and what you'll see is some pre-made drum loops on the left. So you can basically select them and it might be like, I don't know, a jungle beat or whatever, and then it'll basically give you a jungle beat. So in the same way that drummer kind of gives you ideas, this is also going to give you like some starting points in step sequencer, and it might give you some ideas that you hadn't previously thought of. Very last thing on step sequencer as well is just the ability to move a pattern around. So say I had a more complex pattern, let's say it was just like a straight 16s pattern, straight 8s pattern like that, and I want to move it off beat. I can use these two buttons here to just move it. So I can move my whole series and my whole sequence on a channel of my step sequencer over by 1/16th, just, you know, that easy. So it's a really nice addition to the kind of workflow. And if you're like trying stuff out and you're like, that doesn't quite like feel right, and you're not entirely sure what to do and you're just looking for inspiration, like this can be a nice way of just moving stuff around. So like, what happens if I throw my hats off by one beat? Feels different for sure. Much more of a handoff going off in this situation, which is nice. So yeah, so that's a bit of a step sequencer run there, and like what you can do, which is nice. If I just do a bit of a kind of final look at how you might use this. So I'm just going to bring up like a sample. I was playing with one earlier, which was quite nice. This is quite cool. So I'm just going to bring a sample in here. Now this is in a different tempo, but what I can do is I can use Option or Alt, depending on what your keyboard is, and I can basically drag the time into whatever bar length I want. So I'm going to drag this into a 16 bar progression, and I'm going to press U, which is basically going to give me a loop. So this is like quite a dark sample. And I'm just going to show you a different way of approaching this. So if we just recap, right? So let's say we started again on this project. We're going to go new channel, software instrument, default patch. So a quick thing here, which is quite useful. If you want to build a drum machine designer from scratch, you won't be able to find it in this drop down, which is a bit of a weird glitch. So the way that you find it, if you want to start fresh, is go to empty channel strip, then go to create. Then in your inspector window, when you go to instrument, you'll see all this is empty now. Go to instrument, and then down here you'll see drum designer. But for some reason it doesn't come up in the new channel, new instrument window, which is a bit of an annoying one. So I've got drum machine designer up. I know that I want to go into like my drum machine, so I'm just going to use like a deep tech kit, for example, because that kind of matches my sample. So I can basically, I've got a drum kit now. I've got a drum machine. I've selected my tones of my drum machine. I can then right click here, go to pattern region, and then what have I got here? Oh, sorry, no, that's not worked. That's not loaded my samples in. Give me one sec. Oh, sorry, I'm in the individual. Yeah, I'm in. So what I'm going to do is just use a default patch. I'm just showing you how to do the one that was empty. So if I go back one, new channel, default patch, and then I'm going to go to electronic drum kits, deep tech, which changes this. I'm going to right click, create pattern region like we did before, and then what I can do is I can loop this. So when I'm playing the loop, whatever I've got in this one loop region here will basically extrapolate across for the whole loop. So if I want to start with like 4 to the floor, for example, I can then just like start with this. And if I was just trying to jam ideas out, I could then be like, okay, what happens if I like start with some hats in? So you can see very, very quickly how you can move from like having a sample or an idea that you're trying to build a beat to, and just very, very quickly be like, okay, I want kicks, I want claps, I want hats, and just like start building, start playing with sounds, start swapping stuff out, and just move in a very like organic way in 10.5 and 10.6. And I think if you're new to Logic and you're just like starting out with this, it's a great time if you're into this kind of stuff, because the previous versions, 10.4, 10.3, this kind of stuff, this workflow felt really clunky and it was hard work basically. So you've come to the party at a good time is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this session, and you try out some of the stuff that we've covered. Use Drummer, use Drum Machine Designer, use all that stuff. The last thing that I'm going to cover quickly, for fear of running over, is I'm going to just quickly go into this and just mention that in the new version as well, if you're into sound design, a bit more advanced level, you are actually able to go in and build your own drum hits as well. So if you go to drum synth, what you can do is you can actually build your own kick sounds or build your own snares and claps. So if you want something to do next, and you want to go and play with something in Logic, then maybe go and have a look at drum synth. And if you can't find a kick or a clap or a percussion or a hat that you like, try building your own, which is kind of the point at the end of the day. It's about making what you like. So I hope this has been useful. And if you've got any questions, then just leave a comment. And Garnish TV is going to be running most days of the week, indefinitely now. And just join us for more tips and tricks, which are also covered in our courses. So check out our website, and I've been kind. Thanks very much.